Hey everybody, I'm Jarrett Rush. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at Idea Grove, and with me today is Dominic Garcia. He's actually the first non-Idea Grove person we've had on these little conversations we've been recording, and wanted to have Dominic on because the question we're going to tackle today is about how do you integrate your internal marketing team with your marketing agency, and so we need a client's perspective. And so thank you, Dominic, for joining us. I appreciate.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So first, let's tell us a little bit about you and your experience.
Sure. So I have been in marketing for over a dozen years. Sort of grew up in Silicon Valley, working at a variety of high-tech companies. Recently moved back to Dallas. Now I'm head of marketing at K2View, and loving every day.
So in your career, what's your experience with agencies? How often have you worked with them?
I worked at agencies at just about every single company I've worked at. And, even for me, starting off my career, I started off at a PR agency. So started off on the agency side before I went internal, and then sort of worked my way up the ranks on the client side.
And when you're looking for an agency partner, what are you looking for? Is it someone who can be really just task completion, complete those things you can't do, or are you looking for somebody who can be a little more strategic?
You know what? For me, I know this will probably sound a little trite or cliche, but I very, very much look for a strategic partner. I feel very, very strongly that the best ideas can come from anywhere, and agencies, for example, can really not just do things like augment staff or help with execution, but can really help you with giving you ideas and insights that you may not have had. I don't presume to know everything, and I don't presume to be the smartest person in the world, or even in marketing or even in tech or any of those things. So the only way we can get to the best outcome is by making sure that we're looking to the resources that we have, basically and trusting their expertise.
So when you're looking at agency partners, at what point in that search are you thinking about how am I going to integrate my agency with my internal team?
Oh, from the very beginning. For me, one of the other things that is really, really critical is team, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what I just mentioned. Culture to me is very important, and especially team culture. And if you start to look at your agency as an extension of your team rather than people that are just doing execution or order takers, that's where agency and marketing team fit is really, really critical, because you want to make sure that the culture that you're facilitating within an internal team is also one that matches well with your agency. Because if you end up in a situation where, say, with your internal team, you lead with trust, but that does not extend to your agency, you're just going to create problems in terms of, well, the agency did this, or finger pointing. And the reality is we're all a team, and we're all like frankly, I firmly believe that, an agency and a client partner are going to succeed or fail together. It's not, we both have accountability to each other. So making sure that you have the same, values, and at least can puzzle piece together the culture in a way that makes sense is critically important.
So once you've kind of found that agency, that team that's gonna pair with you, what are those first steps you take in the integration process?
For me, it's always starting off with what are the goals? So what are the things that we want to accomplish together? What do we think we can accomplish together? I always find that client side, you're going to have your strengths and weaknesses. Agency side, you're going to have your strengths and weaknesses. So the same way you might look at culture, you also want to look at skill set and where you can help each other out. Like tangibly for me, if I'm talking about myself personally, I tend to be a very, very strong writer, very, very good at content, public relations, analyst relations, maybe not so much on things like, say, coding a website. So making sure that that skill set is complementary and that you're clearly defining what are the goals for this partnership, how are we going to judge success, and then also have accountability. And accountability goes both ways, right? I know in my experience, I've seen a lot of clients think that accountability is on the agency side, and that's not true. Because I have an obligation to support the agency to make them successful. So if I'm not doing my part in terms of, say, meeting deadlines that they give me, doing reviews on content that they give me, and doing those things, I have to be accountable to them, because their success is my success, is our success, right? So.
And so when you're looking at, you covered this a little bit just a second ago, I think, but when you're looking at dividing up responsibilities, who's going to be doing what, what goes into those decisions?
Um, for me, I tend to be mostly a pragmatist when it comes to these types of things. So it's a combination of where does the skill set lie. So in other words, if in our case with K2View, right, we're a little bit of in startup mode. The marketing team is small, so we're looking at Idea Grove in this case as really being augmenting staff. So we don't have the skill set internally to do things like graphic design. So we lean heavily on Idea Grove for things like that. So I always start off with skill set and where are the gaps, and then how do we fill them, and then from there it's a conversation of, okay, well then what are our priorities as an organization, what are marketing's obligations to those priorities. So is the priority lead gen, is it awareness, what might that be, and then how do we best tackle these things from a very pragmatic point of view. Very much not looking at it as necessarily I own this, you own that, but more of what is the best way that we can leverage our resources to accomplish the goals that we need to as a team and ultimately as an organization.
So as this relationship, is successful and the business grows and your marketing team grows with it, how does that change the relationship, and how do you manage that shift between, what is the current reality, or I guess the new reality of a growing marketing team with an agency that maybe had different responsibilities before? How do you manage that change?
That is a really, really great question, because what I have seen is as organizations grow, typically your role gets smaller. And what I mean by that is, if at a smaller company, I was wearing 3 hats. As we grow, you're forced to specialize and maybe wear 1 hat, maybe wear 2 hats. And in my mind, it's sort of the same thing happens when you use an agency, right? So today, if you're using an agency in a full service capacity, again, it comes back to where are the gaps in terms of skill set across internal plus agency. How do you fill those? And then understanding how do you then drive those integrations. This is also why it's so critical to me, like when I think about culture, why it's so important that the team and the agency have a really good gel, because you want to avoid having those things where, well, I used to do that, and have it again really focus on how do we lift each other up, and not get so focused on this is my domain, that is your domain. Now, in terms now more to your question though, what I've seen is it really comes down to being proactive with communication and being very, very clear with who is doing what when. And what I mean by that is, if you're coming from a place where your agency was doing things like, say, product content, and then you hire a product marketer, well, you have to be very, very clear that just because we have a product marketer does not necessarily mean we no longer need agency help on product content, right? It's just a matter of having those discussions and being very, very clear with what are the activities that are in the pipe now, where do we need the support, and then again, where does the skill set lie, or where is it best done? Because you can also have, in that example, you can have a product marketer who's maybe not the best writer, and in that case, maybe the agency is the right place to have that take place.
You mentioned a second ago making sure that the team is still gelling and the culture is still there. Culture is typically something that's sort of outside of the actual work being done, right? So, are there things you do with your agency that make sure that, hey, we still get along, we like each other, we're still a good fit culturally?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those very, very intangible things. For me personally, what I have seen is when you have a really, really solid culture, and it really just drives that sense of team, and then the execution is just better across the board. Because again, it really sort of drives that, we're a team, I have your back, and I will support you when you're down kind of mentality. So when it comes to working with an agency, for me, just a couple weeks ago with Idea Grove, we had a happy hour, right? Like a client Idea Grove happy hour. We did. It was like not Jeopardy, but when you have like those just the questions and then everybody gives
Mm-hmm.
their answers, and it was fun. It was just very low key. We all wore funny hats, but again, like that's my person. That's me bringing the culture to the team, right? Like someone, and typically the leader has to be the one that really drives that culture in the team in terms of and this is me personally, we spend a lot of time at work. If you're not having fun, sort of what's the point?
Yeah.
So, for me, I tend to be a little lighthearted. When I send emails, occasionally I'll put in, a meme or, just things like that that really just sort of drive home that, yes, we are all serious. Yes, we have deadlines to hit. Yes, we have a serious job to do. But for me, that's where the culture really comes in, which is, yeah, I think that's probably just me personally in terms of how I drive culture. So.
Is this something that's easier to do when you're maybe a smaller marketing team? You don't have the vendor mindset necessarily. I mean, we have clients of all sizes, and I think some of our larger clients sometimes see us more as a vendor. They're paying for a service as opposed to, we're part of the team. Is this something easier to do as you're smaller, and does it change as you get bigger?
I'm going to say yes and no. I think, yes, it's easier in that there are less hurdles to jump through to, say, drive that type of culture. In this case, for us, right? I can drive that culture because that's the culture I want to drive with the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get a little older, then you start to integrate multiple agencies. Or let's say I have somebody that reports to me, and then they take over the Idea Grove relationship. How does that person then drive the culture of teamwork within the agency and the corporate mindset? So yes, it gets harder in that there are layers like that, but to me, it all comes back to really two things. Number one, the leader really understanding the kind of culture that they want to drive within their team, and then two, when you're looking at recruiting, hiring, and your agency partners, are those people good fits for that culture?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I tend to just leadership principles for me, right? Lead with trust. Like, I want to assume that you will do your job. I don't want to have to clock watch. I don't want to have to chase you. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't do that, I have to follow up because that's
Sure.
my responsibility and my role. But when you lead with trust, it just sets an expectation with how the relationship is going to go. So,
Mm-hmm.
and similarly, how you approach conversations with your agency. You can go on an agency call and just say, where is this? Where is this? Where is this? Where's that? Whereas for me, it's a little bit more of, all right, let's look at our major projects. Where are we today? And then along the way, I tend to be a little bit of a goofball sometimes. So, I'll drop some puns in there, but, all those types of things facilitate a particular culture within a team.
So what are some problems that can arise if integration doesn't go well, and how do you fix those?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So if the integration does not go well, what I have seen happen is straight up, so I would say first off, finger pointing, especially from client to vendor when things don't go well. So for example, press release date was missed. It was the agency's fault. And if somebody on my team came to me and said that, I don't want to be harsh, but I would say something like, "Do you own public relations?"
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, then it's not the agency's fault. Like sure, they have some accountability there, but you have to take ownership of the things that fall under your purview, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically the first thing that I see, which is um, accountability being shoved off on other people when you should own it yourself, as a way to I don't know, uh, CYA or make sure that you're not the one getting in trouble. um, the next thing I would say is just mismanagement of hours and time with regards to communication. So if we're not communicating well, if that integration isn't really clicking well, you'll start to see things like agency does X, but client wanted Y. So, and then you get to this really tough spot where it's like, well, that's not what I wanted, but this is the direction you gave
Mm-hmm.
me, right? Because that's just one of those things where it's really, really critical that you guys are on the same page and that you understand what the end goal is, because that's what really helps to drive that type of alignment overall. Those are probably the two main things that I've seen happen, and then it's probably worse when both of those things happen. Agency did the wrong thing, point the finger at the agency.
Mm-hmm.
It just compounds on itself.
So last question, and we've kind of covered this a little bit, but if you could summarize, what does good integration look like, and then how can you make sure that happens?
Good integration to me looks like a single team. So what I mean by that is it's not K2View and Idea Grove. It's K2View marketing, right? So it's us operating and communicating as a single team, with the same goals, with the same intended outcomes, and with clear communications. And also critically for me, fun, because again, like for me, it very, very much matters that we should want to be here, right? I mean, and you don't want to be there when someone's like, believe me, I having started off on the agency side, maybe this shades my vision a little bit on how this should work. I've been on the agency side when a client is yelling at you. I've been on the agency side when you give an idea and it's squashed and you think it's a great idea, and on the client side, it's kind of like, well, suddenly I see the why behind it. Maybe it's not really your client. Maybe it's the person behind the client. Maybe it's internal politics, whatever it might be. But that said, when it works well, it is really comes down to just you're a singular team with a single goal, and you are all really chugging away to accomplish that goal, and in a way where there's trust, you have each other's back, and it's really a culture of I am going to support you because I know you're going to support me too. So.
Well, Dominic, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes with us today. I think you provided a lot of great information, and you answered some questions that I know I had, and I think others probably have as well. So thank
Great.
you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.